I wasn't
Good
sure.
morning or good evening, as the case may be.
Yeah, well, good morning to you. I wasn't sure if we were still on for today, but
Yes, that's fine.
okay, wonderful.
Yeah, I've had a few problems with communication. So I had a computer problem, and I've lost access to Messenger
I see.
and Facebook. So I'm migrating to WhatsApp. I'll contact you on WhatsApp to establish that.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, I'll I have your email, so I'll send you my contact number for WhatsApp, and then we can keep in touch that way.
Yeah, that'd be good. And I'm hoping that with a new computer system, I'll be able to, possibly just talk directly through WhatsApp. And
Yeah, no, that would be fantastic, and then maybe we could, if we do another conversation like this, we can put video on if you're all right with that. Just gives people something to look at.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
So, what I was hoping to talk about was kind of broadly, sort of a loose conversation about the occult and politics, or the impact of occult players on politics, which has a sort of interesting variegated manifestations. And I just wanted to sort of preface this with, I think there's different ways to see how important occult players are, and I think the first thing that might come to people's minds when you talk about this is this, there's some people who are sort of the, and I don't want to put this in a kind of, I don't want to be dismissive or of this kind of position, even though it's not one I hold, that sort of occult groups hold a very large amount of influence on political outcomes, and you get that in Genon. I'm sort of more given to the view that things that transpire just kind of in the nature of the declining times we live in. But I'd be interested in what your views are on the matter.
Yeah, I see what you mean. That's right. A lot of people, so-called conspiracy theorists, develop ideas about secret brotherhoods that control the political systems and so forth of the world. And as you say, you get a little bit of that in Genon, certainly in some works more than others, and perhaps Evola too. My own, I don't subscribe to those broader and deeper conspiracies. I mean, as for conspiracies, obviously the basic premise of all conspiracy theories is unassailable, namely corruption in high places. The question is what high places and what form of corruption and manipulation. I'm more of the view that that there aren't secret brotherhoods and so forth pulling the strings behind the scenes. Nevertheless, the occult, so-called the hidden, is nevertheless part of the intellectual fabric of political players at all levels, and so I think it's important in that respect. But I don't subscribe to views that there are organisations consciously manipulating matters, or either the protocols of Zion or whatever, any of those sort of things. But they are interesting in themselves, and of course they're also political weapons, and provide political inspiration for people too. Obviously, the occult dimensions of Nazism are well documented, their interests. So I find all of that very interesting, yeah.
Well, there's two threads I wanted to pick up there. I actually haven't read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Have you?
No, I haven't read the whole thing. I've read sections of it, and seen it quoted often enough too. But I get the general picture of it.
So an argument that's been put to me, and I can't, because I haven't read it, I can't really comment on it. But that might be, you might be able to comment on, is that setting aside which we just established we're on the same page on that, the notion that there are sort of secret brotherhoods orchestrating things, and also setting aside the anti-Semitism of the elders. I mean, it's difficult because it's such a that's the primary intent of the work. But
yeah.
that the mechanisms of social decay described in the elders, that is fair that in the protocols rather, that is an accurate description of what was transpiring at the time that it was authored. What do you make of that notion?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. This applies to Masonic organisations in general, Judaism and other things. The thing they have in common is that they are internationalist. They're organisations which are transnational, and the constant narrative that goes with the critique of those sort of organisations is that they are corrosive, that they're foreigners among us who look like us, who nevertheless have an agenda that is inimical to our interests. And so that they are orchestrating social decay by introducing alien ideas. I think that's basically the motivation behind that sort of narrative. It's about the intrusion of alien ideas and the way that corrodes local traditions, and that there are certain organisations and people who are among us, who are orchestrating this and who promote these sort of things, and that they infiltrate our organisations, they infiltrate our institutions, and introduce corrosive ideas, and that the protocols of Zion is part of that whole web of theories that the Jews are engaged in this wholesale. That's their thing, to undermine the fabric of the societies in which they live. And similarly, Masonic organisations in general are seen in that way too by those people who think the world is being controlled by Masonic players.
And both, of course, both were targets of National Socialism.
Yes,
it gets sort of forgotten that,
and also all sort of other transnational organisations, the Jehovah's Witness, for instance. That's right. I mean, the Nazis were vicious nationalists, and so anything of a transnational nature, like international socialism, was a target for them. Yes.
And to a certain extent, Catholicism also.
That's right. But the issue here is, for me anyway, my perspective is autochthony. The idea that true tradition comes out of the soil. It comes out of the ground. But there are traditions of the sky. There are, Buddhism, for instance, is a tradition of the sky. It's transnational. It's a universal sort of thing. And so there's always that problem with how it accommodates itself in a local situation where there's traditions of the soil. I guess an example of that is Japan with Shinto and the overlays of Buddhism on that. Yeah. So I think of it like that there are traditions of the soil and there are traditions of the sky, and these sort of problems arise from the friction between those two things.
Just as a tangent, so it's not sort of the main substance of our conversation, but I do think that's a very it's a very evocative way to put it. Traditions of the sky and soil, and I mean, I suppose what you mean are universal traditions and ethnic traditions, but the way you put it is much more. I don't know, that moves the soul more, to put it that way. But I mean, suppose that there's an extent to which that when these traditions come down from the sky to the soil, they do invariably accommodate themselves. I mean, even with Islam, which seems to be the most, I'm not sure the right word here, leveling of the sky traditions, you still get this sort of, I forget where I'm taking this expression from, but you get various colors of Islam, right? I mean, traditional.
Yes, you do.
Southeast Asia is probably the most obvious example with Indonesia, but even Turkic Islam is distinct from Persian, is distinct from North African. There's a certain accommodation to what's in the soil.
Yeah, and arguably the Quran encourages this. It says that we are to compete among ourselves in piety, in different colours, as you say. Or different shades,
and there's also this a passage in the Quran, and I don't speak Arabic, so I won't be able to tell you exactly the right translation for the pivotal word here, but I believe it's something that if we could have made you all one tribe, we would have done so. It's probably not the most elegant rendering, but
that's right. That is a theme in the Quran, that this sort of unity and multiplicity in diversity is a theme.
Yeah. Sorry, but returning to the topic of the occult, it seems to me that this sort of paranoia about socially dissolving transnational elements, that seems to me to be a very modern phenomenon, because. And maybe part of that is this shift that one has in modernity from your tradition forming the whole world, and I mean, in Islamic terms, right, that which is within Dar al-Islam is the world, and Dar al-Harb is sort of the dark beyond the extent that which there's the tribal fire, and the light only extends so far, and that which is beyond it isn't really part of the world. Which means you don't have to really worry about these kind of internal divisions in the world in the same way. So maybe this concern
Christendom was a similar construction, but it gave way to Europe, which is a very different idea, a secularization. But that's right. There's the House of Islam, and there's what's outside it. Two different worlds.
And it also sort of, it's interesting that the occult and politics is linked there when you brought up National Socialism, that it sort of, it works outside. Sorry, go on, please.
Yeah, just geographically like this, the occult, what is hidden, is very often material that is crossing boundaries. So conspicuously, Islamic material, when it moves into the West, takes the form of occultism. The Rosicrucians being the prime example. Typically what happens in Western occultism is that some character journeys to the East, meets some teacher or other, and comes back to Europe with secret teachings. This happens over and over. From the Rosicrucians to, say, Aleister Crowley, who in a very Islamic manner goes to Cairo and has his angel, holy guardian angel, recite a text to him of which he is the prophet. That's in the Islamic mode, and Western occultism usually takes that form.
Mm-hmm. And why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's because of problems of assimilation, that you have ideas which are absolutely hostile to the Christian order, or create friction in the Christian order, and they're trying to be assimilated into the Christian order, but some of them have to be isolated and absorbed slowly. And they're the things that go into the occult world. I mean, the really interesting thing is that things that we now regard as science, chemistry, even things like algebra and all of these sort of Islamic sciences, were at first regarded as occult, as magical and as mysterious, and things that had to be spoken of in secret. I find that all of that very, very interesting. I mean, even all the way through to Newton. Newton and his interface with alchemy is very interesting.
It's very interesting you say that, because I was just listening to an interview with Paul Kingsnorth. I think that's his name. Yes, and who said. Yes, Kingsnorth. And I think what he said was something to the effect that Newton wrote more on magic than he did on what we would, sort of from a modern perspective, regard as science.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. My mentor, Roger Sauter, he towards the end of his life, he was reading a lot of those papers of Newton, and wrote a little bit about it, I think, in some of his essays about Newton and Newton's occultism, especially interested in the occult and esoteric background to the idea of gravity. I think Sauter was interested in, yeah. But I don't know much about Newton myself, other than he dabbled with alchemy, and that's an enormous part of his background.
Which is, I mean, even the word alchemy is of Arabic derivation. Sort of speaks to its origins.
Yeah. So what happens with things like that? Alchemy is it moves into Europe, but it's frowned upon by the authorities, and so it has to go underground. It's desired and patronised by the aristocracy, but not against the ecclesiastical authorities, usually.
And why do you think that is? I mean, I'm relating that to notions of the sort of the rebellion of the aristocratic class against the priestly. Is there sort of a dimension of that's at play there, or?
Yeah, that's right. I think there is, but in general, just sort of on a political sociological level, I guess the aristocracy is more interested in the trade of goods and ideas with foreigners than is the ecclesiastical authorities here. But nevertheless, what's happening there is dangerous material, dangerous ideas are moving from one world into another, and necessarily have to go underground and be fenced off. Needs to be constrained or put into esoteric organizations.
And it does occur also that this pattern you described of secrets being someone goes the person from the West goes east and then transmits secrets back to the West that have to then remain secret. You get some kind of maybe perverted reenactment of that in the relationship of Theosophy to National Socialism, since that came up. I mean,
yes, certainly.
So could you sort of talk about, because it's something I only know a little about to what extent ideas were transmitted from Theosophy to sort of German fascism, or is that very cosmetic, or how much there is there with that?
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I'm really not sure, and I'm not well read in that area how much they absorbed. In that German sort of world, I've been much more interested in Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy, and they ran foul of the nationalists early on. In fact, they burnt Steiner's building down in Switzerland.
Huh.
And there are rumours that Steiner was killed by the Nazis. He died mysteriously, Steiner. And also Steiner's an interesting case because he was actively politically involved. He led a movement called the Threefold Commonwealth, which was taking esoteric ideas and turning them into an active political movement, which was very interesting. At the time, at the time, he'd only recently split from Theosophy, and what I know of that is that the German nationalists were absolutely hostile to it.
To Eroticism, you mean, or to the threefold?
To the threefold Commonwealth, and to Steiner's movement in general, and Theosophy. I suppose it's an area that I'm not well versed in. But what they took from Theosophy would have been racial theories and pedigrees of races and so forth, of which there's a lot in Theosophy and somewhat less in Steiner. And as far as I know, there were certainly Nazis who were members of the Theosophical Society in Germany, although the German Theosophical Society has a different trajectory than the British one.
So, because I mean, to my knowledge, the Theosophical Society is still around, and I mean, but I imagine they would have shed those racial ideas. Do you know?
Yeah, they have. Although one person I know in that area says that there's from time to time there's a bit of attempts to go back to their roots and start reading Madame Blavatsky again, but largely they've moved on from it. Yes, that's right. Certainly around here, there's still an active organisation. They run a big bookstore with esoteric stuff and sell New Age paraphernalia, and conduct seminars, things like that. They have a public auditorium and things like that. They're very active, yeah.
And I mean, speaking of their connections to politics, the first president of Indonesia was, I believe, a member or had some involvement with the Theosophical Society when he was very young. And I have,
in
Indonesia.
In Australia, the founding fathers of the Federation were very influenced by that sort of thing, especially one of the early prime ministers, Alfred Deakin. He was an active spiritualist and theosophist.
So how did that manifest in his politics, if at all?
Yeah, it's interesting. It made his politics more liberal without being Labor politics.
Right.
Yeah. So
Maybe just let's assume that the audience knows nothing about Australian politics. Could you elaborate that a little?
So how the form it took, for instance, is that it's interesting when you read the materials from that period. They think that they attribute spiritual and historical meanings to the American Revolution, for instance.
Right.
That there's and the French Revolution before that. The idea that there's sort of a new dispensation in the world and so forth, and the early founders of Australia were impressed by the American experience, but wanted to remain British. But so there's a bit of a compromise. But they're interested in those ideas, and probably interested in the ideas of that universal brotherhood, those sort of theosophical ideas. That and the way it takes shape in Australia is that Australia is a chance to get away from all of the sectarian problems of the old world. Mm-hmm. And Theosophy fits into that because there's a truth which is higher than all the particular religions.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting.
And that we can embody that in our constitution. This idea, there's a very concerted effort in Australia too, because Australia is settled by the British and the Irish. There's a very concerted effort to avoid sectarian conflict, and the idea is that Theosophy and the Theosophical movement was very important in spreading the ideas of a universal brotherhood, which is beyond sectarian divisions.
I mean, it's interesting because when I spoke about the Indonesia's first president, you get there's an element of that in there too in the Indonesian state philosophy of Pancasila.
Yes,
the first principle is I translate it as belief or faith or belief in one supreme divinity.
Yes,
and I'd also insist that I think the way he phrased it, I won't go into the finer points of Indonesian grammar, is intentionally. He didn't use the word God. He used the word that is an abstract noun, which is why I say divinity. And I think that was intentional to be sort of acceptable to Hindus and Buddhists and Confucians. I mean, it sort of changed later on, got a little narrower, but at least under Sukarno. And I think that probably bears the traces of the influence of the Theosophical Society.
Yes. Yeah, most likely. Yeah.
Which is interesting. I mean,
because in the context, he could have been much more Islamic.
Well, yeah, but exactly.
He chose not to be.
I mean, in some ways, he made his life harder for himself because he almost immediately had insurgencies from Islamist groups, or rather, maybe that's unfair, but at least groups that wanted a kind of some kind of constitutional requirement for Muslims to abide by the Sharia. So if he hadn't had a sort of principled commitment to the positions he had, he might have been able to save himself some bother in that regard.
Yes.
I mean, and it's also it seems like an obvious. He was a Muslim, so it seems like an obvious uniting factor to reach for when you're sort of going about nation building. But so it's interesting that they didn't, or that he did things the way he did. I'm endlessly fascinated by Indonesian politics.
Yeah, no, that's all right. That's all right. The Theosophical Society is more active in the British colonies, and so I'm more familiar with those. For instance, I know it was active in Malaysia. Wherever the British were, there were Theosophists who were the Theosophical Society is interesting. It's largely populated by women, because it was an organisation open to women, and that was really really unique in its time, with Madame Blavatsky and so forth. And so, intellectual women who were interested in a wider cosmopolitan world and religion and things like that, they flock to the Theosophical Society. And so often in the British Empire, it may not be that a particular official is an active theosophist, but his wife is. I'm very aware that's part of the sociology of Theosophy in the British world anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, it can't have hurt that it had a female head, I mean, in terms of its particular appeal to women. A question occurs in that regard. So, I mean, they, to my understanding, Blavatsky and Olcott also were very involved in Sinhalese anti-colonialism, sort of the Sinhalese nationalist movement.
They were, yes.
But did that?
That's true.
So yeah, yes. But was that the case in any of the other British colonies that they were active in?
Not that I know of. Not in the one I'm most familiar with is Malaysia, and not that I know of in Malaysia. No.
Which leads to the question of what was
Freemasonry is an interesting case too, because I think that the Chinese took to Freemasonry, and the Chinese were pro-British and against independence. There's a very complex politics.
Yeah, and one that sort of reverberates till today. I mean, I can't imagine that doesn't play a role in the sort of resentments that you still have.
Oh, yeah.
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 Well, the resentment and the revenge took place in World War II when the Chinese took the brunt of the Japanese occupation.
But I do wonder why it was that the Theosophists took such interest in Sinhalese nationalism and apparently not so much in, say, Malay or Indian or whatever else.
I'm really not sure. Although Olcott and people like that were drawn to Buddhism in particular. But I'm really not sure of the answer to that, no. But they're an important part of the Raj and the whole British system. But it's interesting in cases where they're actively supporting independence movements. Yeah.
So, I mean, how united is Theosophy as a system of thought? I mean, you mentioned earlier that the British Lodge went off in a different direction from the German.
Yeah, that's right. And the German Theosophical Society went off in a different direction, and most of them became anthroposophists. The Anthroposophical Society replaced it in effect, which didn't happen in the British world. In the British world, what you had was splinter groups into the more occult area of, notably the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which overlaps with Theosophy in the same period, and which has been enormously influential in Western occultism ever since. And I'm sort of well versed in that because notable people like W.B. Yeats were members of that organisation.
Sorry, that would be the Golden Dawn.
The Golden Dawn, yes. But a lot of those people were, again, Theosophists. And again, the interesting thing about the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is that it was an occult sort of Masonic order open to women.
So, actually, I have questions I want to ask, but I just, as an aside, it's just sort of interesting. My first, if it's true that the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, is still around, I was first introduced to, or I was given my first copy of an Evola book by someone who I was informed was a member of the Hermetic Order. Which is just just interesting aside. But I I was under the impression, so they overlapped, but I was under the impression that Crowley was a little later than the Theosophical Society.
Yeah, slightly later. Like I guess the difference between the 1890s and the 1910s, I guess. Nevertheless, they're in the same general period before the Second World War, and before the First World War, and after that. That's the Theosophical Society, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and other organisations like that were very influential in the British upper class or British high society, with very notable members, famous, important members, people with important public jobs, writers, actors, actresses. So they were important organisations throughout that period, and Crowley's in the middle of that. I think he comes onto the scene in the late 1890s, I think. But he of course joins the Golden Dawn and then splits from that to develop his own organisation, which has been very influential and is still very influential. The OTO in all its various splinter groups.
And well, two questions then. So what's the relation, and I might be betraying my ignorance here, but again, it might be of interest to the audience. What's the relationship between Crowley and Satanism? Because that often gets mentioned in the same breath, but I'm not clear on how much substance there is to that.
Sure. Well, it's an interesting question whether Crowley's like technically a Satanist or not. It's certainly an idea that he liked to tease people with. It's very hard to say. I'm not really not. I don't find Satanism a particularly useful sort of category. It's like the Order of the Nine Angles and supposedly satanic, but is it? What does that even mean? Satanic. I guess in Crowley's case, there's a real case for it, because satanic, properly speaking, just means an inversion of Christianity. It's an inverted Christianity. And I think that's probably a fair description of Crowley's system. But it's not a fair description of other systems. The Order of the Nine Angles is essentially pagan, which is not Judeo-Christian at all, inverted or otherwise.
I mean, that's very interesting, because that wasn't my impression of the Order of Nine Angles, and please do correct me here if you think I'm mistaken, but I got the sense that, and I've not done an enormous amount of reading, but from what I have read, I get the sense that their ideas are largely derived from Gnosticism. Yeah,
to be honest, I can't give an account of what their essential ideas are. They've changed over the years. But the essential, in the beginning, there's this strange amalgam of Welsh paganism and Satanism. And as I say, one of them's pre-Christian and one of them's Judeo-Christian. And I've never understood how those two things go together, nor the further developments of it, nor the connection with Islamic jihad, nor all its other manifestations supposed. In fact, the more I look into it, the more I wonder whether it's a phantom of some sort. No doubt it has some reality from time to time, but it's a completely amorphous thing that may or may not exist in various forms. I don't know.
I mean, what was very interesting, and I think this is what sort of the lurid thing that gets a lot of attention with the Order of Nine Angles, is they've got sort of extensive involvement with neo-Nazi groups of various descriptions, and also sort of even within the spectrum of neo-Nazi groups, the particularly nasty and violent ones. Sort of, Atomwaffen Division and Combat 18 and groups like that. Sort of the kind of people who get thrown out of neo-fascist parties for being too extreme.
Too hardcore,
yeah. But there is this kind of ambiguity when you look at the Order of Nine Angles as to, are they, they get presented as neo-Nazi Satanists. How committed are they to fascism, or is that sort of a means to an end for them? Is that sort of just a manifestation of this of their spiritual practice as it is?
That's right, and that's how they present it. As far as I can tell, they present it as it's a spiritual path that consists entirely of transgression, and that it's essentially transgressive, and so you can add whatever transgressions you like to it. Neo-Nazis are one, and Islamic Jihad's another, and it essentially seems to be transgressive. So how serious are they when they become neo-Nazis? How committed are they to that? Or is it simply, this is just another exercise of transgression?
Yeah, and you see, or rather, from what I've seen, I've seen a bit of both. Although I've seen some where it seems that they really are committed to neo-Nazism of some description, but then the sort of the more the commitment to chaos. Rather than kind of a specific political program, and that somehow seems intuitively, and this isn't my final word on it because there's much I haven't read or looked into, but that seems to make more sense. And things sort of come full circle here a little because that is something they share in common, sort of commonalities in that regard with Alexander Dugin's politics. I mean, I think Charles Upton has him understands him very well. I think his book on him is really where one should start. But you get the sort of, sometimes Dugin sounds like a fascist, but sometimes he likes to present himself as almost as a liberal. And the only sort of consistent current there is chaos, and I mean he does after all use the chaos star as his symbol, which and this is where I say it comes full circle. Isn't that symbol not from Crowley but from one of Crowley's disciples? Is that right?
I think so, but I'm not sure of its exact origins. Yeah. But that's right. Well, Crowley, let's remember, was a British spy. He spoke fluent Russian. This was his big advantage at Cambridge. He was really good at Russian, and he was picked up by the British spy system very early in the piece. And it's hard to tell exactly what his role was in all of that. But he certainly went to Russia. Operated in Russia as a manager and promoter of dancing girls, and then his liturgy in Thelema is founded in the liturgy of Russian Orthodoxy. So there's a lot of Russian in Crowley. How that goes into Dugin and the connections there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of at the fringes of my knowledge here, but I mean, there's a relationship between Crowley and chaos magic, right? I mean, that's
But Crowley becomes a fountainhead for just about everything. He becomes the golden boy of Western occultism. You know, he appears on the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, the Beatles album. He's a cultural hero he's rediscovered from in the 1960s. And so chaos magic and all of those sorts of things, it's unavoidable that they have a lot of Crowley in them.
Mm. But he didn't. Did he have any kind of explicit?
He certainly wanted to create chaos.
Right.
And one of the interesting things about him is that he very effectively smears dirt everywhere he goes on important people, all the way to Ananda Coomaraswamy.
Huh.
And so he's an important character in that regard.
So this is total news to me. What's his connection with Coomaraswamy?
Oh dear, it's very lurid. It's salacious.
Well, if you don't want to speak about it,
okay.
But
okay, yeah. In his younger times, Coomaraswamy lived a bohemian lifestyle in New York, and somehow or other, his wife became involved with Aleister Crowley. Crowley writes about this in his autohagiography, as he calls it, and yeah, so that's a stain on Ananda Coomaraswamy.
Mm.
Crowley, in fact, in his autohagiography, he implies that he impregnated Coomaraswamy's wife and that Coomaraswamy organised the termination. Uh-huh. And he calls Coomaraswamy a murderer. That's the sort of character Crowley is. He finds his way into every nook and cranny of the British intellectual class and stains everyone he touches.
Yeah.
And so I think he has some sort of providential role in that regard. No doubt.
Well, could you expand?
Because he was a very high-functioning psychopath.
Sorry, could you expand on that with a providential role?
Well, I think that there are, as well as from time to time, you get luminaries like, a volcanic genius like Nietzsche, or a pure pneumatic like Guénon. You also get malevolent characters who are a function of the times. And I think Crowley must be a candidate for one of those.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in that sense, satanic isn't quite such an inappropriate descriptor.
No, that's true. It's inverted. Yeah, Crowley. I think there is a satanic element in Crowley if you get down to it. Although I don't find it a useful sort of category. And one must also distinguish it between Luciferian.
Well, yes, indeed.
So where we situate Crowley in that demonology is a technical matter, but he's certainly on that side of the ledger.
And there's also something sort of chaos pursued for its own sake, which I mean certainly seems to be of that type of person. In the sense that is deeply satanic in that it's this inversion of order, of the order of orders. The reception of Donald Trump in the Californian branches of the OTO was really entertaining, because the leader of the OTO at the time embraced Trump and the Trumpian disruption, but a lot of members of the OTO were appalled, and there was a huge ruckus in the organisation about all of that, as there was too about
transgenderism. They've been tearing each other apart about those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's both of those. I mean, what does an agent of chaos do when society becomes chaotic, right? It's not really obvious whose side it should be on then.
That's right.
Yeah, and
that's right. So that's right, and that's what happened with the OTO people. So when the Trump deviation arrived, lots of them realised that actually we're actually like establishment progressives.
Well, yeah. No. And I imagine the sort of the alignment of the evangelicals with Trump would be quite disconcerting to those people.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's
excuse me.
No, it's all right. Yeah, it's a funny thing, and then you get sort of the loudest self-consciously satanic group in America right now is the I mean they're maybe already a little passé, but the what are they called? I think it's the there are those people who stuck a statue of Baphomet in front of a Capitol building. It's the Temple of Satan, I think.
Is it? Yeah,
I think that's the name of it. It's something
they
like
come
that.
and go pretty rapidly, those sort of organisations. Yeah, but there are organisations in the United States that want to push the freedom of speech business and push that sort of thing into the mainstream. Just as there's pride parades and things like that want to push those sorts of lifestyles and deviations into the mainstream. So that's a very American sort of context, it seems to me. But that's right, they want to openly challenge the Christian establishment in America and the Christian norm in America.
Although politically...
And Crowley, interestingly enough, is on the libertarian side. What you find with the Crowley people, so certainly, I mean, these days it's hard not to know people that are in the OTO because it behaves as sort of like a Theosophical society for people that are interested in the occult and assorted misfits. And almost invariably it overlaps with libertarian politics because Crowley's whole thing was, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. So it has this very strong libertarian, and Crowley's politics is very libertarian, although he's anti-abortion because of the Kumaraswamy episode.
Well, maybe because it suits him in that instance to be anti-abortion. Yeah. I mean, it's also interesting that the those sort of the Temple of Satan. Let's just go with that being their name. Has this very socially progressive political agenda. Yeah. But the group from which they split with the Church of Satan, their founder, Anton LaVey, had this a very interesting kind of political outlook. I mean, he didn't sort of develop it systematically, but he sort of seemed to be something of just halfway between a fascist and a libertarian.
Yes.
The only sort of through line there was this sort of social Darwinism. It's just that he thought it should operate on every level.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. Sometimes teaching religious studies, I think you get kids that come in and they're under the influence of black metal or that sort of music genre, and they'll tell you that I'm a Satanist. And there's the problem of what you do with kids like that. And in a secular context, it's not your business to provide spiritual counselling. So all you can really do is say, well, okay, my job is to make them, a more intelligent Satanist. So you say to them, have you read Anton LaVey? And they say no. And you say, well, have you listened to his entire back catalogue of recitals on the Hammond organ? And they say no, because Anton LaVey thought that all rock and roll comes from is essentially gospel, and a good Satanist as opposed to it all. He's a really interesting character, and as you say, it's basically this sort of libertarianism, but it's not. He was strange because he wasn't into the rock and roll chaos of the period in which he lived.
Yeah, I mean, he's a consistently contrarian figure. I mean, he's sort of maybe like a less abrasive American equivalent of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, not so flamboyant and not nearly so smart. Crowley was a very, very intelligent man. As I say, high functioning.
Well, there's also one can draw connections because I know LaVey had briefly had an involvement with James Mason, who's a big influence on Atomwaffen and the sort of neo-Nazis that the Order of Nine Angles get involved with.
I see.
Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of loop there. It's strange because I think Anton LaVey was actually Jewish or partly Jewish.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Which is very odd, and it's strange that those people would overlook that because they're generally quite obsessive about that kind of thing.
They are.
Sort of looking for Jews in the fibers on their between the fabric fibers on their sofas, and no, it's interesting. James Mason was involved, as connections to both sort of strands of Satanism. Very, very disturbed individual, him. I've read his book, much to my regret. But sorry, I've sort of lost the thread with where I was going with this. Just as an aside, it might interest you. There was recently someone was arrested. Someone with, I mean, it's hard to. You can't really be a member of the Order of Nine Angles because they don't have a membership list, right? I mean, it's just sort of. I don't know how to describe people. Someone who is affiliated or initiate. Yeah, right. I mean, you initiate yourself, so. And
there's no central organisation. It's completely anarchic.
Yeah. Which is in keeping with its theme of chaos. But let's say an affiliate. I'll go with that word. Was recently arrested plotting to assassinate Donald Trump.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a couple of days ago.
He claimed to be a member of that order, did he?
Well, he was influenced. His ideas were influenced by the Order of Nine Angles, he killed his parents. As I recall, I might be getting the details of this story wrong. I mean, he definitely killed his parents. I think the idea there was to get the inheritance and then use that money to fund his plot to murder Donald Trump.
Dear me.
Yeah, which okay. I mean, it's ambitious, but it's very in keeping with the Order of Nine Angles.
Yeah, but again, I'm just not sure that there's even is such an order. Whether you can describe it as an order of any sort. It's not an order.
No,
there's
it's
no
not.
Order.
It's a disorder of nine angles.
It's just all angles.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very good way to characterize it. It's a. Yeah, I don't know what the right, but maybe that's very appropriate given the ideas that it involves. One of the strangest involvements of the Order of Nine Angles is, I mean, I'm fairly convinced that most of their sort of foundational texts were written by David Mayat. He denies that, but it seems
that seems to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was involved with Combat 18, which is...
Oh, okay.
Right, which I've always been fascinated by this, because they do not seem like the kind of people who would entertain that sort of... I mean, neo-Nazis, but from the sort of skinhead football hooligan end of things, who really don't seem like they'd have any interest in the kind of thing that the Order of Nine Angles espouse. I mean, one, because it's too complicated, but also, it's kind of weird and doesn't really fit with the the working class macho thing they have going on.
Yeah.
So it's a very odd fit.
Yeah, that is very odd. The thing about that is, what that makes me think of is that with David Myatt and some of the other people associated with that so-called order, is that there's this business of infiltrating some chaotic organisation or something, and the idea is that you go. It's an operation. It's part of the mission. It's part of the path is to join some organisation and become totally and utterly committed to it, and yet finally you're not, and you leave it, and it was just an experience. And here in Australia, there's a character, I won't go into it, but who claims to be a young journalist, who claims that he has gone deeply into the Order of Nine Angles, and he explains how you have to. It's a rigorous spiritual process by which you have to completely abandon yourself and give yourself wholly to this group. And he describes how he suddenly gets late night phone calls, and he's gradually inducted into the deepest of secrets, which are absolutely sort of the most transgressive of obscenities. And then he describes how he had to then drag himself back out of that, and it was all just an experience as a journalist. That seems to be part of the deal with the Order of Nine Angles, so that someone like David Myatt could become a Muslim for 8 years, and then at the end of that he says that was just an operation. Or become join a group of skinheads and become deeply embedded in that. What you're interested in is their chaos. What David Myatt was interested in was Islamic jihad as a tool of chaos.
Although, that also seems very consistent with what I've read from them. But then, and just sort of make things more confusing, they do seem to be quite disproportionately involved with neo-Nazis. For one thing, for example, I'm not aware of anyone from the Order of Nine Angles except for Myatt himself who was involved with Salafism. That's true, yeah. Yeah, it seems to be the sort of go-to for them seems to be Nazis, and maybe
Nazi groups,
and maybe that's
I don't understand that either.
Which then suggests that there's more to it than just kind of a means to an ends, or maybe it's just that's what they deem to be the most transgressive thing. I don't know. It's hard to say. Also, what kind of undermines it a bit is that. So with Combat 18, I'm pretty certain they were not aware of what Myatt was into, but a lot of the newer groups like Atomwaffen Division, National Action, these groups do seem to be consciously aware of and sort of very conscious of the Order of Nine Angles. So that would sort of seem to.
I guess the consistent thing, let's leave aside the supposed Satanism. The Order of Nine Angles is supposed to come out of folk traditions in Shropshire.
That's right.
Nastiest thing to ever come out of Shropshire. And so it has that ethnic basis. Now, if you follow some of the links in Order of Nine Angles, you end up in all sorts of places. There's no consistency to it at all. In some cases, you end up amongst groups of radical lesbians, witches, Wiccans, not Wiccans, various types of pagans, neo-pagan, feminist sort of groups, so very radical, and that at least is consistent with the supposed origins of the Order of Nine Angles, that it comes out of, a women's tradition in Shropshire, of all places.
I mean, maybe, and as you said, it's not really an order. Maybe the best way, and I'm very reluctant to say when a member, because how can what does that even mean? But maybe the best way to characterize it is as an aesthetic. It doesn't really have there's nothing really sort of consistent or rational about it. It's just kind of, it's a vibe, and in that way, it's something sort of profoundly postmodern.
Yeah, and on the fringes, it even has its own music. I mean, there's sort of a neo folk or black metal. If you like album names that are associated with Order of Nine Angles or in any way, if you look those up, you'll come to two genres. One of them, it's sort of a neo folk thing, and then the other one's is sort of black metal.
And then there's also the Order of the Black Light, which which is very involved with the black metal scene. And again, I haven't looked into it extensively, but when I look at what they say, it does seem to be like it's just a somewhat watered down version of the Order of Nine Angles. I mean, it doesn't, they've excised most of the political stuff, but it seems substantially similar.
Yeah,
and again, like as I say, that's heavily involved black metal.
I guess the Order of Nine Angles just it's just one of those things that fits the particular mood of a time, and develops a life of its own. That's what it seems to be. And a particularly nasty manifestation of postmodernity. Yeah. I guess the chaos thing is an extreme version of libertarianism.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't thought of it that way. No, that's a sort of a collection of Marquis de Sade's. I suppose it's more libertinism than libertarianism, but nonetheless.
Nevertheless, that's really important. That strikes me as really important. But all of that is French Revolution. Yeah. And for de Sade, he thought that was the essence of the French Revolution.
Well, yes, I think you've actually made this point online before, that sort of sadomasochism has this kind of intimate connection with the French Revolution.
Absolutely, yeah. My view of it is that sadomasochism is the typical erotic form of Western modernity, and that it comes from the French Revolution, and for some reason it becomes an indelible stain after the French Revolution, and that the Kingsters with their whips and their torments and their hoods and things, and their cheesy dungeons out the back and things like that, all of that, they're just reenacting scenes from the French Revolution. That's how it strikes me, anyway. And it's very interesting that particular eroticism becomes fixed. It becomes fixed, and just extends right through to the present day. This is not to say you don't get sadomasochism in other erotic cultures, but not like in European culture.
And then there's also, I mean, look, this is not my field of expertise, but as I understand it, within the sadomasochism, there's also this sort of fetishization of the Holocaust. Nazi aesthetic can overlap into that. Yes. And it makes me want to reread von Kuhnhelt-Ledeen, because he had much to say about this. It's been quite a while since I've read him, but he makes it very insistent on the connection between de Sade and the French Revolution, and also the continuity between that and Hitler.
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could remember it better, because then I could do it more justice. But it's a very interesting thinker. It's sort of a Catholic libertarian monarchist.
Yeah. I've not read it myself, but that's right. That's the genealogies of these dark paths are endlessly intricate and difficult to follow. But a large number of them go back to the French Revolution. Yeah.
And again, sort of connecting to how we started this conversation, it's part of why I sort of it intuitively rings false with me, the idea that there are organized brotherhoods orchestrating the organized cabals orchestrating the chaos we witness, simply because it's too chaotic. I see them as much victims of the chaos themselves as any of these people are perpetrators of it. It's something that's truly chaotic can't have ringmaster.
It's like people who want to tell you that President Trump is playing some sort of 5-dimensional chess. It's much more likely that he just doesn't know what he's doing.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, exactly. This is exactly my feeling. I try to stay out of contingent politics, but
yeah, sure.
But with Trump, it feels like watching a drunk careening wildly around the highway. Behind the wheel of his car, and then hearing people describe his brilliant maneuvers around the other vehicles on the road.
That's right.
When it's really just blind luck that he hasn't crashed into someone. But
that's generally how I feel too. That there's just, we live in an era of just chaos, which is not to say there isn't a telos to it. Not to say that it isn't drifting in a particular way, but I don't think, and that there are people who are exhilarationists who are encouraging it to move in that way. But I don't think that it's by design, not by human design anyway.
No, and also with accelerationists, I sort of get the feeling it's a bit like standing in a storm and flapping your arms around because you can think you can make it worse. Sorry. Well, no. Look, I'm sympathetic, or empathetic rather, with this desire to impose some kind of order onto it, because it's the absolute immanent in the human heart has the grand design of all order within it. So we want order. We have this natural gravitation towards order, and when you're confronted with the chaos, you want to be able to see some kind of order in that. So I have empathy with that, but I also think that the unfortunate fact is there is no order in it beyond the kind of telos that you pointed towards. Although for the time being that telos is just towards greater chaos. Although since you brought up accelerationists.
It's limited how much order you can impose upon the chaos. But obviously, just on a day-to-day level, you want to impose as much as you can.
Well, yes, of course. But yeah, no. Sort of just mentioning accelerationists. This is the last point I wanted to cover is I know you haven't had maybe much opportunity to read Nick Land, but Well, if you have anything to say about it,
in his collection of essays, and but also more recently, I've watched quite a few hours of him talking, recent sort of stuff, and I find it very strange. I I can understand a little bit how he became a neo-reactionary hero, some of his ideas. But what he's actually talking about is actually very strange, you know. It's coming from... It reminds me very much of... let's see. It's like living in the novel Naked Lunch, you know. It's...
Yeah, that's a very good description of land, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, and like in one of the interviews I was talking, he's telling us, he's talking about this hard political theory and so forth, and being taken very seriously, talking about metaphysics and continental philosophy and so forth. But at the same time, he's telling us that he's receiving messages from the 10 kings of Atlantis that Plato describes in the Critias. And that these messages are coming from the future, and that he spent, what did he say, 15 years with the Lemurians.
Yeah.
And so on, and yeah, I just have a lot of trouble separating his philosophy from his delusions.
But you know, also he sometimes, listening to him or reading him, he sounds like a kind of like, you know, what a traditionalist, how a traditionalist would describe a kind of Silicon Valley. No, so let me put it this way: a traditionalist's, you know, horrifying straw man of a Silicon Valley transhumanist.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
actually,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah, like
yeah, like he talks a lot about his research unit at Warwick University, but it wasn't no such thing. When you look into it, it was a group of 3 or 4 academics who met in a small office to take amphetamines and talk about science fiction. And the really thing that really worries me there is the science fiction.
Yeah,
because that's what I find, that those sort of characters, their whole intellectual world has been shaped by science fiction, which they regard as profound. And that's certainly true of Land. He's a science fiction mind. And so, yeah, transhuman sort of that whole area of which I think of as associated with science fiction. And I'm aware of it because I'm not a reader of science fiction, so I'm really aware when I run into people whose minds are obviously really formed by science fiction, really shaped by it.
Well, I mean, this gets into our
he's a case of it, I think.
No, I agree, and this gets into our previous conversation about neo-reaction. But you know, you see that with Yarvin too. I mean, his single biggest contribution to discourse is the red pill, and where did he get that idea from?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
that's right.
I watched. You know, there's this. There's this. This mini series, Adolescence, that's very popular in Britain. It's on Netflix.
I've heard about it. I haven't seen any of it.
Right. I mean, it's you know, it's very competently made. But the reason I bring it up is because they mention the red pill quite a few times, and you know, that's Yarvin's impress upon popular culture now.
Yep.
but yeah, no. As you say, it's an idea he took from science fiction, and that's what shapes the worldview of these people. But with Land, it's like he watched the Terminator and sided with the Terminator. You know, it's the most intensely misanthropic. You know, with most transhumanists, there's this kind of idea in there that their self-conception is that they want, you know, humanity to transcend in some way, and that's very deluded. But I can understand what they've deluded themselves into thinking. Whereas with Land, it's just kind of that sort of outright desire for the obliteration of humanity.
Yes,
it's very, very dark.
Yeah, it's very, very dark. It's very dark, I know. and I avoid it. That's why I haven't read much Land, except what's come up, in the neo-reaction sort of stream. I feel much more comfortable with Bronze Age pervert myself, just because at least he's got a Greek flavour, a Homeric flavour there, and is much more entertaining. But Land is very dark, yes.
Yeah, and it's this. I don't know. Maybe that's just the result of doing philosophy on a lot of drugs. But
I guess, especially that amphetamines is the drug of choice for those science fiction people like Philip K. Dick. They say that he wrote his books on, he sent himself psychotic on speed, and you can tell in some of his novels, people move from one dimension or one time zone into another just by going really, really fast.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a particular psychosis associated with those drugs.
I wasn't being flippant when I said doing philosophy on drugs. I mean, just what's really profoundly objectionable about recreational drug use is that it's kind of, you take yourself further from reality. Look, there's ways that drugs can be used. The peace pipe and so on that bring you closer to higher
context. In
a sacred context, but in the sort of denatured context in which they are used by these people, it's just sort of like it's opening up the ground beneath yourself and plummeting down into oblivion, and then when you try to make that sort of a guiding system of thought, you produce things that sort of, that sort of satanic in the sense of aggressively moving in the direction of the chaos, which Land does very self-consciously. And I don't think it's a coincidence that you have a drug that's called speed that seems to link into a philosophy that's about acceleration. And I mean, consider that in the light of what Guénon says about the speed and the mania for speed.
The drugs are political in this context, though, because it's sort of the politics of William Burroughs. There's the idea that we live in this. It's a Gnostic sort of thing, that we live in this prison, an intellectual and spiritual prison, and they've closed off all the doors, and there's no way out. And the only way out is that drugs provide a way of smashing out. They provide it. That's why they're illegal. That's the politics of it. They provide a way of smashing out and making contact with the reality outside the Overton window that we're not allowed to see. So I see that the drugs is very political in that way, and no doubt Land is using the drugs in that way, using amphetamines to access a level of ideas that otherwise would be forbidden or even unsuspected. For Burroughs, the way it works with Burroughs is, excuse me, the way it works with Burroughs is he thinks that every idea that comes into his mind has been is a spirit. He wants to re-spiritualize the intellectual world. They're not his thoughts. They're coming from, and that in that spiritual world there's no past or present and future. So some of these thoughts can be coming from the future, some from the past, and so on, or from the distant past. But nevertheless, he's using heroin as a means of just watching that stream of consciousness and thinking that this stream of consciousness is coming from a realm external to himself. And Land gets into that idea too.
Yeah. I mean, as you were speaking about Burroughs, I could see the shades of Land in that.
And Burroughs develops that. He's got the most thorough development of that. Burroughs is an important person in that regard. And it goes into Scientology too. Burroughs was a member of Scientology.
I mean, sometimes I'm surprised Scientology isn't bigger. It seems so, I don't know, so of a piece of the times.
Seems to fit the zeitgeist, but in fact, it's fading away. Its heyday was the 1990s. Its membership has really plummeted in recent times.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, as far as that we don't know the official membership, but every indication is that their membership has been in decline for a long time now.
I mean, for what it's worth, I did see their centre in Vancouver, and I made the mistake of booking myself a hotel in downtown East, which if anyone knows anything about Vancouver, that's not somewhere you want to be at any time of day. But that's where their centre was, and that is just about the worst real estate in Vancouver. So I mean, I never saw it open. So maybe that's symbolic of their fortunes.
They built a large place here too and opened it up. And I was invited to go, which I did, and they were very nice to me and all of that. My impression is that there weren't many people there, and yet it was a very big complex. And my impression is that it was largely a real estate enterprise. It's not about the membership at all.
But it's a very strange. I have to repeat myself. I'm surprised it's not doing better, because it does seem to be so in keeping with the zeitgeist. Well,
it does. It does, but in fact, I think it's a bit dated now. I'm not sure how, but it is. It is. I think of it as very 1990s, that sort of period, a bit later. But things have become much darker now or something. I'm not sure. I think the zeitgeist has changed somewhat.
Yeah, and there's chaos, this instability and disorder. That seems to be really the flavour of the times, and I suppose there's not that element in, at least as far as I know, in Scientology. There's this sort of modernity, for its deep faults, kind of had a floor on it, in that it wanted to, have reason and material and kind of a solid ground to stand on, and that all kind of dissolves away in post-modernity, and you just have a whirling nothingness.
And so you'd think that people would grab hold of something like Scientology, and some people do. But for some reason or other, I think its heyday has passed, and it's been replaced by other things.
Oh, I don't doubt that you're right about that. I wonder how that maps onto Tom Cruise's earnings at the box office.
Well, that's right. They particularly aimed at high achievers. And in some ways, it's a system for high achievers, and I can understand. I got into a lot of trouble myself, because I foolishly wrote an article in which I said that Scientology just repurposes some useful psychological tools, for the most part. And there were academics and cult busters and people that said that I was being an apologist for Scientology. But the fact is that there are people that find Scientology useful, and they're usually high achievers who live under lots of pressure, like Tom Cruise and actors like that.
Well, look, if that wasn't true, then they wouldn't gain any traction. Exactly.
But in academia, you are not allowed to say anything that could be construed as sympathetic to Scientology, because Scientology picks a fight with the psychology and psychiatric establishment.
There's this saying, and I used to think it was. I used to be under the impression it was from William Blatty, but maybe it does have some kind of scriptural basis that the devil mixes truth with lies. But I found that a very helpful statement through the years, because any evil, in order to gain traction, in order to sort of even have any kind of existence, has to have something of truth in it.
That's right, and they say the devil's a gentleman. No doubt that he is. That's right. There has to be some. It trades on that germ of truth.
Yeah, I mean, well, exactly. Otherwise, sort of, strategically, it wouldn't gain traction, and ontologically, it wouldn't exist. I mean, you can see that, sort of, the Bolsheviks electrified Russia, and they industrialized it. They had some kind of capacity to deliver in some regard, right? I mean, Hitler and the Autobahn, you can point to that with any of these things.
The CCP in China and wherever.
Exactly. It's sort of the Chinese people have stood up, and that's true. They did sort of create a unity, and when the PLA soldiers showed up, they didn't rape everyone in your village. So you can always point to these things. That's how a thing gets traction. Something like the Order of Nine Angles. I mean, it is a very marginal phenomenon, but that exists at all is really stunning, because it's very hard to find what that little kernel of truth in it is.
Yes, yeah.
But it must be there.
It must be. I guess it's the chaos. The virtue of it is tearing down a corrupt system.
Oh yeah.
There's some virtue in destroying a corrupt system, even though what you're left with is utter chaos. That's the position of those people, I guess. It's nihilistic. I mean, it's in the end, it's just nihilism. They're nihilists. They've given up on everything, and all there is left to do is just rip it all down.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a very good way to characterize it.
But I don't think it's not like occultism. Occultism is, occultism. One of the problems here is that the Western tradition doesn't really have a legitimate and well-defined or well-formed left-hand path.
Well, that's
someone like Aleister Crowley tries to single-handedly invent one.
Yeah, I mean, as I understand the left-hand path, that's a very good point. I mean, sort of East and South Asia seem to have much better developed ones at the very least. But what would that even be in a European context?
Anyone that goes left-hand, their option really is to go for inversions of Christianity, to go for Satanism.
But does that...
As I say, Luciferianism is different. I think that's a different matter, yeah.
But is there a left-hand path within the Islamic world?
Apparently there is, but I've not encountered it myself. But I have met Muslims who are very well versed in it.
I see.
And they point to me, for instance, they say, most of Ibn Arabi's stuff was on sorcery and occultism. You only read the metaphysical stuff, and apparently that's true. I've looked into a little bit of Ibn Arabi. Yeah, there's a lot of that, and it's been sanitized. A lot of that has been sanitized, but there are certainly left-hand paths in Islam. I corresponded for a long time with a young woman who was into such paths.
I mean, maybe it's sort of the vice that accompanies the virtue is always accompanied by a vice, right? I mean, there's a kind of, at least within the realm of the contingent, within the sort of within samsara, everything is imperfect by definition. So, maybe the one of the problems of Christendom is that it has this virtue of wanting to sort of extirpate everything that isn't. I struggle to find the right word here, but sort of in its zeal to extirpate that which is virtuous, it's closed off the possibility of a left-hand path, and the kind of karmic compensation for that, the consequence of that is that it's also the Western world which has given us Satanism.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know of any other part of the world that's produced a self-consciously evil spiritual system. You mean you have left-hand pathings, but that's not the same thing.
Not the same thing, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah.
I mean, it's been pointed out to me that sort of the way that traditions degenerate is contingent on what their virtues are, right? What become their vices in degeneration is determined by what their unique geniuses are. So maybe that's an aspect of that.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm just thinking out loud.
Well, Christianity takes Orthodox Christianity takes the conspicuous form of an organisation, of a church. It's an organisation. It's with a hierarchy and rules and its own legal system and so forth. And so Satanism is likely to take the form of a church as well. And that sort of organisation, I guess. So,
that seems like a slightly inorganic place to bring things to a close, but I have to admit I'm fading. It's pushing midnight here.
Oh, is it? Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. That's right.
And I don't want to deliver a see, I'm already failing. Substandard level quality of conversation.
Covered a lot of ground there.
Yeah, no, it
it's a very big topic, hey.
Yeah, it was, and it was a very good conversation, very very broad. It's a lot of different things a lot of different directions you can take that topic in. I mean, I think we covered everything I had on my mind, but I'm sure there's something else. And listen, if your technological situation, if and when your technological situation improves, it'd be very nice to sort of have something with video in it, and find another subject for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm working on that. I have limited skills, but I'm getting some help from people. And my main problem is that I've been cut off from communications on Messenger, and so I'm trying to recoup, make contact with people through WhatsApp.
Yeah, I'll email you my my number tomorrow.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Right. Well.
And also that also means that I'm cut off from Facebook.
Yeah, I've noticed your absence.
Yeah. So I'm having to just do my work on YouTube at the moment. That's what I'm going to do, and forget about Facebook. Facebook just put me through verification loops until I couldn't do it anymore, and they kept freezing my account.
Yeah, I mean it's because they've outsourced everything to AI, is my understanding, which is very poor at distinguishing what the sort of intent behind things, and that's why you get sort of flagged for pornography for posting a statue.
Yep, that's what happened. And after that, I must be on a hit list or a notice list for the AI, and every time I move, I just get frozen.
Yeah. No, yeah.
So I'm going to have to give up on it, which is unfortunate, and I'm looking for other forums. So the Substack, you're on Substack?
Yes, I am. I mean, Substack's great for long-form content. I mean, that's what it's really intended for, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at Substack, but as you say, that's long form content. Whereas I'm more interested in just occasional, I write a paragraph in the morning, basically.
Yeah, and and it doesn't have the same sort of. It's not as good for the kind of conversational thing that Facebook does.
No, an interaction, nothing of that. Anyway, so I'm unfortunately locked out of Facebook. It's a totally hostile system, and I'll have to move on to other things.
Well, I'll keep me abreast of developments, because I noticed you started uploading things on YouTube actually, again.
Yeah.
So I'd
yeah.
like
On Facebook, I even opened another account, and it wasn't tricked by that. It immediately froze it.
Yeah, no, it's too clever for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't escape Skynet. Sorry, you haven't seen Terminator, so that's all going to be lost.
Oh no, I've seen Terminator. I haven't seen what's the other one? Star Wars.
Star Wars. Oh no, spare yourself that. Totally unnecessary.
There's like 8 or 9 films or something. I haven't seen any of them, but yeah.
I think I saw the 7th one in the cinema, and that's when I gave up.
Yep.
I mean, look, I saw them when I was a child. It was part of the atmosphere I was raised in, but really does nothing for me. I mean, look, Terminator's hardly high art, but there does seem to be something strangely prophetic about it.
Yeah. I thought it was well done. It was all right.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to base a political philosophy on it like Nick Land.
No, certainly not, and don't. He's very mistaken. I think he's a little confused about who the protagonist in that is supposed to be.
Yes, true.
It's a bit like reading Lord of the Rings and walking away with sort of, wow, industrialization is great. It's not.
Oh, that story must go back to Frankenstein. Must go to Mary Shelley. The taming the monster.
No, that's true. Although there people do that though. I mean, the number of people who, not read Frankenstein, but watch one of the many film versions and identify with the monster when he is supposed to be a monster. I mean, he is monstrous, and he does. He's got a little bit of a sympathetic streak there, but he's, in the novel anyway, he's pretty rotten.
He's a monster.
He's a monster. He doesn't just look like one. But then I think, someone like Tim Burton is a very, very influential filmmaker, and his whole career is basically predicated on the fact that he identified with the monster. With Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah. There's science fiction people. The problem with them is that they think it's profound because they haven't read anything else.
Well, yeah, and also because, again, this connects to that Kingsnorth interview I watched. Religion, but science becomes a kind of ersatz religion. So things that feed into that, like science fiction, that sort of imagine the heights that science can reach. But sorry, I'm falling asleep.
Yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, but I look forward to our next conversation, and thank you for sparing me the time. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. It's great. Yeah.
No, it's always good to talk. All right, you have a good day.
Okay, thanks. Right. Bye.
Bye for now.
If you value my work, I'd be most grateful if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with anyone you think might be interested. If you would like to support me in working on this project, I'd be deeply thankful if you would consider becoming a regular supporter through Patreon or making a one-time donation through Ko-fi, links in the description. If you do subscribe, please remember to hit that little bell icon, because otherwise YouTube won't inform you when I upload new videos. If you'd prefer to read my essays over the video format, they are all available in written form on Substack. Link also in the description.